to start with seaweed, just a quick overview. Some good points have been raised in the video just before. I'd like, first to thank Zephyr and Solublue, because they're coming a long way from Holland, and they're coming also from UK, and they really wanted, to be with you to share what will be the next revolution. So we've seen that some of the people are testing and developing some seaweed opportunities, but seaweed is really much more than that. It's all about the regenerative aquaculture. By nature, when you grow seaweed in water, it's natural, it's organic. The only problem we're facing today is that most of the seaweed is coming from China. Heavy pesticides, hormones, and heavy metals. So in order to use the seaweed, in order to treat the seaweed, we go for heavy chemical treatments. And most of the seaweed is not suitable for the pharmaceutical, for the cosmetic, for the feed, and for the food. So we try to refurbish this and try to develop some very standard product for the industry. And some great companies in China are doing well because they have the monopoly on this. But we want to invent a new model. And at BioMarine, 7 years ago, we started to think about the seaweed value chain, and we focused on developing an organic network of seaweed farms. So our most important concern is the farmer. The farmer should be able to have a decent living and be able to reinvest in local communities if we want to build this new value chain. And then we start talking to the processors, the processor doing organic processing, no chemical, no treatment at all. So that means that in the value chain and in the product that you're going to see today, it's only natural product. The plastic that you're going to see for the polybags is exactly the same polymer than the polymer that was in the sea in Mozambique. And it's not only essential for the future vision of a balanced and regenerative economy, but it's also fundamental to understand that the farmers that is at the origin of the seaweed will be able to have a decent revenue that will help to grow their families, send their kids to school, and also to participate to the entire value chain. So now I'm going to jump into the real business, and from here. So I want to ask them, because the introduction has been done, but in a nutshell, I'm going to start with Reste. Reste, can you explain what is important for you in terms of seaweed revolution and why you're sitting here today?
Hello. So I met a BioMarine organization approximately 2 years ago, and we have been trying to identify the different opportunities that seaweed could bring to fashion industry. So, as you know, fashion industry is responsible for 2.1 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year. And in our path to reduce this carbon footprint by 55% in 2030 and to reach carbon neutrality in 2050, we need to implement carbon neutral solutions. So, bringing to the market new materials which could reduce consistently these emissions is a must. And we believe that seaweed could help on this, and not only on the climate change, but also on other environmental issues.
You're right, and this is a very important point. Seaweed is not only the only way to match, and to reach, the Paris Agreement objective, but it's also with the potential 66 million square kilometers that we can cultivate around the world. It's also the fastest opportunity ever. Not to mention the sargassum in the mid-Atlantic that will be used in the future at a very cheap price. Now I'm going to move to Nienke, and all the products that we're going to talk and present to you today, they are actual products. So it's not perspective, it's not something that we're going to do in 5 years. It's real product. So you know that in the fashion industry, the two most important plugs are polybags, plastic, and the dye. Really, really bad. So I decided to bring you two innovative companies and unique startups that have worked on this as a startup mob. And with us today, we have Nienke and Anne from Zephyr. And Nienke, tell us about, the dream that you wanted to accomplish. So why you decided, to work on this dye from seaweed?
Well, first of all, hello everybody. I have a background in design. I'm a designer, and I didn't want to contribute to polluting the world more by making textile designs. I wanted to work on a solution. And I live in The Hague, a city in the Netherlands close to the beach, and that's where I fell in love with the ocean and also saw the potential of the sea as a source for new sustainable materials. So I started to experiment with seaweed, and because I knew how polluting the dyes are that are currently used, I thought, let's see what seaweed does. And I was very surprised with the white color palette that I could achieve. And here I was still working in my own atelier on a very small scale doing some tests. But the colors that I got were very beautiful, from green, pink, purple, yellow, orange. So I was very convinced that it shouldn't stay just in my small atelier, but it should become part of the industry, of the textile industry. And that's when I started working with Anne, and we...
So Anna is the other part of the brain, because,
Yes.
Zephyr is the big brand, and you function very well. So tell me more about, your association, Anna. Does it mean that you just wanted, to make a quick coup and develop something, or is it something more deep and profound in the vision that you want to develop?
I think that's a good question. Thanks for inviting us. It's really nice to be here, so that's thanks for that. What we really wanted to do is change the industry, and a change can't be done quickly. That's, of course, which you want, but it's not possible. So we really need to have like a long way to change that, and developing it and making the dyes which we used to make by hand and now are making in the lab, making it for the industry ready. That's a long way. And you need to do testings, new testings. As you know, there are lots of kinds of fabrics. So we have to test on all those kinds of fabrics. We also have to really be sure that, because we want to change the industry, so we want to make an impact on the industry. And that means that we also want to be transparent. So we want to know where the seaweed farmers, where they get their seaweed from. The lab people, we're all working locally. We're working from the Netherlands, which is, of course, also because we want to have good labor for people. That means that all those kind of things we want to have transparent, because next to the natural part of and the impact for the environment, for us, like the social impact is also really important, that both of them are equal and right. Yeah.
I must say that since I started to be on that board of this Blue Fund, my only mission, and thanks to my partner Isabelle de Crémou from Seventure, we really want to make a change, because investing, and that was one of the questions I asked during this session this morning about the regenerative economy, say, how can we make a change if the investor do not understand what is at stake and how fast we can deploy this capital? There's plenty of money, but it's going to business as usual. I don't want the seaweed industry to become a commodity. I know that we need to save the planet. I understand that we need to feed the people, but we have the technology. I was with another company in Holland doing biorefinery from seaweed. They can produce massive quantity of protein and at the same time bioplastic or energy. We have the solution. It's how we're going to educate the investors and get them on board. And to that extent, I have a very good case, with Solublue that I'm following for quite a long time, 2 years now, Francis. Right. So when you started in your kitchen, when you started, to think about, the bioplastic, what was in your mind with you and Aisha? What did you want to make as an impact?
We recognized that, fashion industry, food industry, other industries all have a very, very big, profound plastics problem. And we're producing plastic in the billions and billions of units. So in order to tackle the problem, we realized that we also had to produce in those numbers and find a way to scale technology very, very fast. And we wanted to solve not only the very visible plastics problems, but also the invisible problems. I think consumers have become quite well aware that, when you wash your clothes, it's producing microplastics. Half of microplastics in the ocean are from textiles. But there's this whole hidden aspect to that, and that the consumer never sees. So the polybag is a really good example of this. In Europe alone, we're making 38 billion of these per year. They're getting thrown away, they're ending up in landfill, they're being incinerated, because this type of plastic is really, really difficult to recycle. Only 2% of this plastic is recycled. Half of all plastic in the ocean is this type of flexible plastic. And so we're obviously, as a society globally, not capable of capturing and managing all of our waste. It's ending up in marine environments, ending up in ecosystems. And we realized that we had to create a polymer materials that would break down very fast. That was really, really critical, and it would break down in any condition. If it ends up in the ocean, it's edible. So we created a new material, soluble material, with the building blocks from seaweed, because seaweed is a totally natural product. It comes from the sea, so if it ends up back there, it's not a problem. Marine life can eat it. And our material it looks and feels like plastic, but it's edible, it's totally natural, it's benign, it breaks down in a matter of weeks. So it's a perfect alternative to plastic, perfect alternative to single-use packaging.
Pour ceux qui ont du mal à suivre tout en anglais, ce qui est important de comprendre, c'est que cette algue qui sert à faire des polybags, qui sert à faire de la teinture, c'est aussi une algue, exactement la même, qui permet de faire le seul produit pharmaceutique qui protège du Covid, mais aussi qui traite en fait des intestins. Donc c'est important de comprendre que dans cette chaîne de valeur, on utilise un ingrédient qui est produit par des gens partout autour du monde, en Alaska, au Groenland, en Afrique, sur les côtes du Mozambique, en Australie, en Inde. Et ces gens-là, en fait, ils n'ont qu'une vision, c'est ce que l'industriel va vouloir leur acheter à un prix ridicule. Et donc, il faut qu'on change tout ça. Il faut qu'on crée un nouveau modèle socio-économique qui va nous permettre de développer une chaîne de valeur complètement disruptive. So, coming back, to the dye, which is really a nasty industry, tell me more, maybe, Nienke, about the seaweed that you're using, because we're talking about seaweed for the polybag, and to be honest, you're going to have to feel that, to touch that, and even to see Nienke's color. Can you show some of the colors that you've been doing with your seaweed? This is truly amazing. This is the most polluting thing ever in the fashion industry, and we have something that is pure polymer. You can eat it, you can put that in the water, you can put that, in the organic bin, and it's pure seaweed. It's ready for the change. You want glue? We can do the glue with seaweed. You want color? Look at this. Any type of biomaterial. It's pure algae. Explain this. Anne, Nienke, while she's presenting the colors. Why don't you explain, how do you do that?
No, it's a secret Coca-Cola recipe, so we can't explain how we do it. But what I can say is that we are making them in the Netherlands, and we're making some of these samples are because we have 3 types of seaweed. We have the brown seaweed, we have the red seaweed, and the green seaweed. And most of the seaweeds we're using at this moment in time are the brown seaweeds, but we can also use some of the samples are from the green seaweeds. And what we do is that we do lots of testings because we have so many fabrics, and what mostly is asked is, can you use it on linen? Can you use it on cotton? Can you use it on wool? Can you use it on lyocell or any kind of fabric? And also blends. People are asking us lots of times, can we dye on blends? Yes, we can. But we prefer to use the most natural products which there are, because that's the way why we're using seaweed. And I think an other really important thing to address is that we're using the 100% of seaweed, because what we also often see is that people are saying we're using seaweed as a product, but then there's only 2% or 4% seaweed inside of the product, and it's still, the rest of it, it's not natural at all. So I think the whole process of developing and making the product should be, as I addressed earlier, should be really like, you should be careful for your environment, and it should be a natural product, but it should also, the social side should be it's really important.
That's an interesting bridge, to my next question for Reste. So, Reste, you're from the fashion industry. You're dealing on a day-to-day basis with all the manufacturers, the transformers. So, why do you think that seaweed will be such a breakthrough or a different raw material that can, give hopes, for the industry? And what will be the differentiated factors from your angle?
So I think seaweed is interesting because it's lessen all the impacts. First of all, it does not compete with food crops because there is no land occupancy. Second, it doesn't need fresh water nor chemicals to grow. It has 4 or 5 times more carbon capture than trees in Amazon rainforest. And it is fully biodegradable in a natural environment. So this responds to so many issues. So I believe, indeed, if we want to improve the fashion, respond to the consumers' needs, and to the government's also regulations, seaweed could be part of this new transition.
So having my 2 hats, I'm going to switch, to the investment hat, and I want to address, the economical issues. When we're talking about a new biomaterial, it's always, from the industry point of view, it's always, oh yeah, it's going to cost more, what's about my margin and what's my return on investment? So the question for you, Francis, you're developing this new polybag. What do you think we can achieve in terms of price, and when will we be competitive in terms of, size and production? Can you give us, some basic economics on this?
Yeah, the cost question we obviously get asked a lot by investors, customers, but also rightly so because they are cost sensitive and we need to be competitive. They also increasingly understand the value of becoming more sustainable by using our products. The brand value, that in itself is very valuable to them. But to really answer the question, we need to look at the kind of history of plastics and where it's come from and where it is now. So there's been over 80 years of scaling, research and development, cost optimization to bring costs down to where we are today with conventional plastics. Bioplastics as well have had 30 years of cost optimization. And that's what we're up against when bringing new material to market. It's a challenge, but it's also something we can learn from, because we know that as we increase volumes, costs come down. And we know that when we scale this, because the seaweed is available all over the world in industrial quantities, we're going to be cost competitive with bioplastic. That's achievable with a totally, sustainable material that can capture carbon and replace plastic globally.
When Annick invited me, to come to Fashion Green Days, I thought about, the potential, and we've been discussing for quite a long time about, the polybag replacement. We've been part of some of the exchange, online on Zoom, as usual, for the last 2 years. But I've been participating yesterday and today, to these sessions, and I thought about, the real potential of trying, to write a blank page. This is a unique chance. And on my side, I'm convinced that seaweed will play a very important role for developing countries, but also to reconcile, the nature and the business. I think that we've been talking a lot about regenerative economy. This is the point. It's all about this. We're going to go back, to the technical aspect, and Nienke will explain, how complicated it could be to use a new biomaterial. But from this vision, reconciling, you know, the fashion industry with a new model, we need to go back to the roots. And that's why, you know, I go back, you know, to Reste. You're working on a day-to-day basis with all the brands. What does it take to convince a brand to jump into the future and take a leap of faith, honestly, and say, well, I'm going to go in that direction because that counts for me, that counts for my brand, that counts for my customers?
I think it's a matter of maturity and also governance. So some brands are ready to jump in the transition. Some others are not ready yet. I think that it's maybe because also of the customer positioning. It depends who you address your products. But for a company, big companies, I think it's necessary to commit on sustainable goals, to be clear and transparent on what you want to achieve. So if you set some targets, some goals towards sustainability, there is a need to achieve it. So for this, step by step, I believe that the market will change. But there are some, some breaks. First is the economic one. When you go to propose, let's say, the alternative option of the cotton or the alternative option of the viscose, it will cost more. So they have to see if their consumer will, let's say, buy this concept. So communication has also a big role. So I would say it's a complex thing because it's global. You need to communicate on your goals and to try to achieve them.
The beauty of the blue economy at large is to be a trans-sector provider. So we can source, we're working on projects for space, we're working on projects for fashion, we're working for pharmaceutical, and we bring, you know, the adequate solution still with the same fundamentals. It has to be balanced in terms of productions, in terms of cost, but it has to be regenerative. And I will mention quickly an example before the next question to Zephyr. I was talking with the CEO from Caroon, the new brand. Everybody wants, you know, to get these glasses, and it's coming from Patagonia. And the founder is a very nice chap. He realized that, you know, the local communities, they were starving. So he started to look into the fish nets, the plastic, and he said, well, why don't we use the recycling plastic that is polluting all the beaches and the coast? And he started to launch this brand. The brand is becoming like crazy. Everybody wants to buy this eyewear. And then say, well, now I want to get rid of the salmon industry. It's so polluting. So he's into the regenerative seaweed aquaculture. And he asked me, he said, Pierre, can we think about, you know, the best use of seaweed? Say, well, I have so many candidates that you're going to connect with that will provide biomaterial, fiber, but also dye. Because the next step and the way we function as a network at Biomarine is really to get people involved. So the next step will be the fiber, and I will come back to this. But before the fiber, let me jump back, you know, to the dye. So from the dye perspective, you're talking to the camera, and many people are watching you and listening to you. What will be the two questions you, Anne and Nienke, you want to ask the audience? You know, because your product is ready. There's, of course, R&D to perform, you know, to get to the next level. But if you have two questions, one each, to ask to the audience, what will be your expectation and what you want to ask them?
That's
it was not on the paper.
My question towards
the
audience is, mostly it's the question from the audience towards us. So.
No, the audience will ask you questions, but your question to the audience.
Well, what kind of colors do you think we can make?
Anybody has an answer? Not yet? Okay, so...
I can give you a little hint. We can't make the color blue, because because it's not in the palette which we have found in the seaweed. So blue is the color we can't make, but all the other colors we can.
Ça, c'est une question très intéressante. Le bleu est toujours problématique. Et en fait, il existe, pas une algue, mais il existe des micro-algues qui ont un pigment bleu qui est déjà utilisé en alimentation et qu'on peut utiliser pour faire de la coloration des algues avec de la micro-algue. C'est une cyanobactérie et dedans, il y a un pigment bleu qu'on peut utiliser pour ça. I'm going to bring you the solution for that. And Francis, what will be the bottleneck that you want to overpass for developing your bioplastic? What is the next step?
We need to scale production so we can produce prototypes like this in the lab. We can also produce rigid products for the tag seals on clothing, as well as the flexible and composites. But we're producing in small volumes, and we know that we need to supply billions of these. But the big breakthrough that we had was around understanding the manufacturability of this, and that it does have compatibility with existing line equipment. Really early on, when we set out, we realized that we couldn't, in bringing a new material to the market, we couldn't also reinvent the wheel in terms of manufacturing and ask all of industry to change their line equipment to reinvest in, what they're currently using to process plastic. So we're developing ways to make this compatible with existing line equipment so that packaging manufacturer, converter can stop producing plastic and create solid blue material instead. And that's the way it's going to have the biggest impact.
Okay, so we have lots of people from the CSR watching us, buyers, purchasers, and people, from the R&D. So you're listening. So I'm going to ask each of you to face the camera and talk to these people. Say, well, what will be the bottleneck we want, to overpass for the next development of Zephyr, for the communication between, the fashion and the biomarine world, and from Solid Blue perspective. We're going to start with Reste.
So I think that, do you hear me? Yeah. So I think that the behaviors of the purchase has to change. I think I heard this yesterday as well. Now the buyer has like a new job if you compare to what he did before, just negotiating the prices. Now they need indeed to consider so many other things in their process. So once they get, let's say, clear information of what they can buy, what they can propose, it could bring a real improvement in the materials and in the offer of the brands. The other bottleneck I can see, it's what I was saying before, is price-wise. We need to be able to scale up all these fantastic opportunities in order to make them affordable for everybody.
That's good. Nienke?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we start to realize that we need to solve problems by looking at the bigger picture. And I think seaweed can offer that bigger picture because it's already a very sustainable raw material. And yeah, if you connect it to the social aspect and local, then you can really build a whole new economy that is not harming the world, but actually contributing to a healthy circle of life. And I think if people realize this, it will change their behavior in buying. Hopefully investors will also invest more in solutions like this, in companies like this. So I hope people will, they change their perspective on new economy and also on our company, and we get more funding.
Thank you. Anne?
Yeah, I think it's also something which you partner up with each other, because I think what we see now with testing with brands is that it's really something which you do together. We have the invention and we know how to dye, but it's something which you really are doing together, making these new materials dyed with the seaweed dyes.
Francis?
I think my message is, fast fashion is obviously deeply embedded in our lives, and it's a really big environmental problem as well. But I'd also like people to reflect on the fact that, the agility of fashion, the fact that it's fast and it can pivot and change rapidly, can also be an advantage at a time when, we're facing unprecedented need to change, for environmental reasons. As we speak, the, geopolitical landscape is being fundamentally altered. Trade relationships are changing, and we have to move away from using fossil fuels. We have to stop using oil, we have to stop using gas. But we know that bioplastics are not an alternative because they require land to grow, they require water, it's competing with human resources. There's soon going to be 10 billion people on Earth, and that's not a solution, it doesn't work. But what we've been talking about today, I believe is a solution. Seaweed is a solution because it doesn't need land to grow, it doesn't need fresh water, it's abundantly available. So my message is, for us to do this and to scale this, people watching, investors, industry, you need to invest in this. You need to invest in this, and then we're going to make it reality.
Thank you. So just for the record, Annick, we participate, on June 2nd, we have a global event, 24-hour live session. And if you want to learn everything about seaweed, it's, the event where you should be. So it's free, you can register online. Annick will participate, to the panel on fashion. We start in New Zealand, we finish in Tahiti, and we cover all the ground. So you can meet with people online, and there will be 2 or 3 panels where we're going to discuss the dye, the bioplastic, and also the fashion, but the investment as well. So it's really interesting. And before I pass you back, the mic, I would say a big thank you for Fashion Grid Hub for organizing this type of event. It's very important that we connect the different silos. We don't talk to each other, and that's a pitiful situation. And we need to have more synergies and connect with people. So the next step for us will be to start a consortium on the seaweed fiber. We want to be able to deliver a seaweed fiber in less than 1 year. And if you're interested, join us, participate to this venture. They are open, for receiving funding, participate to this new adventure. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing about the background of seaweed world. Thank you very much. So do we have questions? Est-ce qu'il y a des questions?
First of all, thank you very much for all you're doing. I selected only 3 questions, specifically to Francis.
Thanks.
First one is, I wanted to know if you forecast to product nearby industrials. That means mostly Asia, Turkey, North Africa, Europe. Second one, it's regarding the LCA of your solution. Have you already done it? And the third one, it's regarding today our poly bags are mainly going till our stores. And today there is a recycling issue because there is no specific collect for that. So how your solution could avoid it? That's my tricky.
Okay, so at the moment we're just prototyping these and they're made in Cambridge, England. But that's not always going to be the case, and we're going to need to produce all over the world. The good thing about this technology is it's relatively simple when compared to some bioplastics processes. We're not highly processing this, it's a natural polymer. And we think we're going to be able to partner with seaweed producers and processors to add additional steps to what they're doing to produce this polymer. So that allows them to make a higher value product, because part of the problem in the seaweed industry, you have issues like Indonesia exporting the raw weed for very little cost, China processing it, adding all that value, scraping off the profit, and we could potentially put forward a model where they can make more money from this as well, and it can be done distributed all over the world because seaweed obviously is available globally. Life cycle analysis was the second question, so we're working on that. We know we have data from the farmer, the processor. We know that it's farmed in very high social welfare conditions. We know that it captures carbon. We're now measuring how much carbon we capture when we make that into the product.
I can be more specific on that point. We are developing, before we start expanding the industry, we're developing a blockchain. So our non-profit arm, Seaweed First, is working with the farmer, and we have a rating system where we're going to help, all the farmers to improve their quality level, and at the same time, we're going to check, the polymers through the blockchain from the water to the final product. And if you calculate, what will be the Scope 3 and Scope 4 emission using this bioplastic, you're going to have, in the end, a negative purchasing price, because we're going to use the carbon credit for this type of product, and it opens an entire new perspective in terms of future developments.
Thanks, Pierre. And that kind of hinges into your last question, which was about waste management, the recycling problem. As I pointed out earlier, it's very difficult to recycle these plastic poly bags. 2% is being recycled. They're often laminated, they're hard to collect. They're also often not worth it financially to recycle. So our solution is compostable. It's compostable at home. It breaks down in just a few weeks. And it adds value to the soil. So part of the life cycle analysis will be understanding how much nutrition we can take from the seaweed and put back into soil to help support agriculture as well. So this is the model. This is the kind of circular, the wider circular model that we're developing. It's a wider circle than recycling is. It's a natural one, in fact.
Okay, we have another question.
Hi, thank you very much. That was a really fascinating discussion. You've convinced me. This might be a stupid question because you mentioned farming just now, but could you say something about the renewability of the resource of seaweed?
That's a very good question. So when we started to look at the market, we realized that we won't be able to use the Southeast Asian seaweed. So we looked into the organic seaweed production, and at this stage, with the non-profit that we've started, we have 3,000 hectares around the world, representing farms in Alaska, in British Columbia, in Greenland, in France. We have also farms in Australia, in Mozambique, in Zanzibar, and Tunisia. And we expect to be 3 million hectares by 2030. And to that extent, we want to work with the big, large corporations to use one of their CSR budget line to accelerate the seaweed farming. And during June 2nd, we're going to launch the first telethon. So that's open to the public. And people can donate €1, $1, 1 cent. And this money will be totally redirected to seaweed farm as an accelerator. So we want to convince the public and the consumer that if they start to use seaweed in their daily routine for fashion, for personal care, for whatever, there's going to be an increased demand of organic seaweed, but with our rules and not, the rules from the large industry players. So we don't want to deal with that. We don't want seaweed to become a commodity.
Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions dans la salle?
Moi, ce que je peux vous dire, c'est qu'on vous attend, et vous qui utilisez les polybags, vous qui utilisez de la teinture, il faut absolument que vous les contactiez. Toutes les coordonnées seront en ligne. Ils sont prêts pour répondre à vos défis. Et puis, nous, on a besoin de vous pour améliorer les solutions et puis pour donner de l'espoir à nos fermiers qui sont partis dans cette logique collaborative. Donc, si vous êtes prêts, nous, on est prêts.
Alors, il y a une question en ligne.
Yes, there's a question from someone in the Zoom. She is wondering, when you have clothes made from polymer which are extracted from seaweed, how long will it take for the clothes to be degraded, to disappear? And won't it be something which we would push consumers to be reluctant to buy something which are made from seaweed?
So that's a good question. And so far, the only fiber that exists on the market is sisal, 5% seaweed and entirely celluloses. So it's not seaweed. When the seaweed fiber will be a reality, it's going to be a natural polymer. So the same way that this one could be soluble, and I'm talking to the cosmetic industry, you know that they're using lots of plastic, and they say, well, instead of throwing that to the garbage, throw that into the bath tube. You want to have a spa treatment? Yeah, we can put active ingredients in the solid blue plastic, so it can dissolve in the hot water, and you enjoy, you know, your bath, you know, for 2 hours, enjoying like you be in the sea. And the dye is the same. They're using natural ingredients, so there's no waste and there's no issue with pollution. And for the fiber, it's going to be the same. We want a 100% seaweed fiber that can biodegrade in natural condition in very easy way.
I would just add as well, we need to think about what we use this technology for. So if you're developing polymers to break down and biodegrade quickly, clothes, fashion shouldn't be single use. We should be using this for single use products. Clothes should be multiple use. You should wear them as much as you can. So making biodegradable clothes is perhaps not the best application for this technology, and that's why we're focused on packaging rather than clothes for now. I think that's important.
Yeah, and maybe I can add to that because textiles should be long-lasting, our dyes are also long-lasting. So they have a really good light quality and wash quality as well. So they won't fade as much as normal natural dyes. So yeah, I agree with what you say.
But I invite you to come on the stage and just touch that. It's really beautiful, and until you touch it or you feel it, you can't really understand. It's not plastic, it's seaweed. Come on the stage and see that.